Hello, 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 and welcome again to our humble channel. This is Dapsy Chess. We have an interesting game we want to show you today between Pragg, who is actually one of the top 10 players in the world, with a rating of 2741 from India, and another Indian player, Mendonca, Leon Mendonca, who is rated 2636, I think so, maybe 2638. Like I said, another Indian player. This was actually the fourth round of the ongoing Tata Steel chess tournament, which is actually taking place in Wickensea. Interestingly, Pragg has been pretty impressive in this tournament. This is his own tournament. He's been really, I don't know, maybe he's out there to prove something, but through his plays so far in this tournament, he's been playing pretty well. So this is an interesting game that I want to show us. And if when you look at this game, it wasn't as if his opponent Mendonca really went wrong. Like I don't think he really made a very bad move that just loses the game. But somehow Pragg was able to, through slow maneuvering and just moving forward, was able to get some advantage. And after that, it was really hard for Mendonca to survive the game. So this was actually a Ruy Lopez opening, I think so. So let us get right into it and see how this game went. Yes, Pragg had the white pieces here. He started with the move e4, e5 was played, knight f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6, bishop goes to a4, knight to f6, hitting the pawn on e4. Normally in this position, d3 is actually most the played move nowadays. But in the past, people have always gone for the castles long, castles short, and you really can't take the pawn because white gets the pawn back. For example, if you can't do knight takes now because I can actually take on c6 for to take back, rook to e1, and then you're going to drop a pawn on e5, and this just looks good for white. So this didn't happen in the game. But instead, like I said, nowadays in this position, d3 is actually one of the most played moves. So white simply defends his pawn on e4, creates an opportunity for the bishop to get out. He's going to castle, and then the maneuver starts. So d3 is played, b5. Of course, you have to play b5 because there was a threat of bishop takes c6 followed by knight takes d5, just losing a pawn. So b5 is played, bishop goes to b3, bishop to c5. All these are like normal moves in this position. Like this is a standard, and this is actually becoming a standard line. Yes, let me put it that way. Standard line in the theory of this opening. So bishop to g5. And actually in this position, one of the most played moves here is c3. c3 is played, and also a4 is played sometimes. The idea of a4 is actually to force black to respond to the capture because there is a pin on the a5. So most of the time, black just brings the rook to b8. So in this position, Pragg played bishop to g5. When we check the tree for this opening, it's not really a move that is normally played here. It doesn't mean it's a bad move, but it's just not the normal move you have to play in this position. So Pragg played bishop to g5, probably trying to surprise the opponent. Bishop to g5 is played. Then we have h6, bishop goes to h4. Black plays d6, white now plays c3. Now, of course, like I said earlier, c3 is a very important move in this position because it threatens the push to d4 and also stops the knight from dropping to d4 at some point in time. So c3 is played, bishop goes to b6, a4 is played here. Now you're like, why is Pragg delaying his castling? Sometimes white could just castle and then black can start putting some pressure on white's king's position. But I don't know if black can do that with the pawn advance on a6 and b5. I don't think that would be a good idea because that means the king is probably going to be stuck in the center, and you don't want that against the strong players. So a4 is played in this position, rook to b8, captures back, knight to a3, hitting the pawn on b5. So let us see how black responds to that. It plays b4, knight goes to c4, hitting the bishop on b6, takes on c3, takes back on c3, still keeping on down the d4 square. It's interesting, Pragg's king is still in the center. I mean, he's developed all his pieces, he's actually started some active operations, but his king is still in the center. Very strange. So is his opponent. His king is still in the center. So castles now following black, white. Pragg also castles. Now, king to h8. Of course, the idea of the king to h8 is actually to try to push this pawn at some point without exposing the king to this long diagonal. So, bishop to a4. At this point in time in the game, it's kind of a slight advantage for white. But at this point, Pragg started putting pressure on the opponent's position. And pressure pretty much means you're creating threat. Bishop to a4, putting pressure on the knight. So he responds to it by moving bishop to d7. Actually, in this position, bishop d7 was not the best move. The best move would have been to move the knight to e7 and then bring the knight to g6. This is a typical maneuver in the Ruy Lopez. Sometimes we see this maneuver also in the Guko piano opening. So knight e7, knight g6 would have been a good idea. What's the point of that maneuver? To bring the pieces closer to the king side, just to come say hi to the king, that's all. So bishop to d7 is played here. And then we have rook to b1. Like I said, at this point in time, even though Pragg, who is on the white side of this Ruy Lopez, had a very slight edge, he just kept putting pressure on his opponent. And that's why I said this was a very technical win. Almost like a smooth win, like, in the words of Maurice Ashley. Very smooth. You see what I'm talking about. So g5 is played, bishop goes to g3, bishop goes to a7, rook a1. Now, we don't want to exchange pieces right now. We don't need to. And of course, the rook a1 creates a threat of bishop takes e6 and rook takes a7. So that has to be responded to. So it goes back to b6, rook to e1. I really like the way white's pieces are played. Nothing spectacular, but the pieces are just waiting, for position to get opened up. Here plays knight to e7, now d4. Now, I've actually had this situation in some of my games in the past. I've always been very hesitant about making a move like d4 because I'm like, the more pieces exchanged, the quicker the game might lead to a draw. But really, it depends. If your pieces are actually better placed, it makes a lot of sense for you to open up the position. But if your pieces are not so well placed, like the way black pieces are, you could say black pieces are a little bit cramped. If your pieces are not well placed, so it's not a good time for you to open up the position. And actually, if your pieces are not well placed, you want to try and trade off those pieces so that you're not stuck with some bad pieces. So bishop takes a4 was played here. Rook takes a4, takes on d4, takes back on d4, knight to g6. Now, the maneuver to the king side is not going to fetch much. Why am I saying this? Normally, when you try to create an attack on the flank, anytime you try to create an attack on the flank, you want to make sure the center is closed. Because if the center is not closed and you try to create an attack on the flank, your opponent is going to break through the center, and that's going to give you some problems. So knight g6 is played. D4, e5. This is what I'm talking about. Pragg just keeps exchanging pawns, exchanging pieces. For me, like I said, I'm like, I'm not going to try to just keep exchanging because I don't want the game to get into a drawn position. But this is the thing. I'm going to say this again. If you're actually better placed, like white is, any exchange you do is actually makes your position better, not worse. It's just going to make things a little bit more difficult for the black pieces. So e5 is played here. Knight goes to h5. Trying to get rid of this bishop. This bishop is actually very strong. Even though it doesn't look like the bishop is doing much right here. But it actually puts a lot of pressure into the heart of black's position. So knight h5 is played. Takes on d6. Knight takes g3. Takes on c7. Queen takes back with the h pawn. Of course, it makes a lot of sense to take the h pawn. You don't want to take with the f pawn because then you're going to have to be dealing with this very, very brutal bishop on b6. All of a sudden, after all the exchanges, white is up a pawn and it's just winning, really, just like that. And this is what I said. When you are up in material, or when you are up positionally, you want to open up the position because when you do, it actually makes your position much better. So white is up a pawn after all the exchanges. So how does he go about to make this pawn count? Rook to e8. Now, rook to e8 was not a good move by black. I really don't have an idea of what would have been a good move here. He said probably king to g8 is a good move. Rook f8 is actually also a good move. Makes a lot of sense to put pressure on the weak pawn on d4. But he says rook to e8, rook b to e8. Sometimes it's interesting to see grandmasters err in positions like this. We see this a lot of times. So after the move rook to e8, the engine says white is pretty much 3 pawns up. Although technically right now it's just a pawn up. So let's see how the game continued. Knight to e3. What's the point of knight to e3? Very obvious reason. If I can jump to d5, exchange more pieces, I have a strong unopposed pass pawn. So knight to e3 is played. Queen to d7 says, no, I don't want you to do that. I can't let you, just go ahead and start putting pressure on my position. Actually, at the same time, there's pressure on the rook on a4. Let's see what white does. White plays queen to a1. What's the threat? Still protecting the pawn on d4, protecting the rook, probably clearing the d file for the rook. We're not sure. But what we know in this position is white is looking much better. So king to h7. Oh, now that tells me the idea. There's an extra attack here. But then it's not really such a big deal. There's really nothing white can get much from this discovered attack. But then black says, you know what, either you're getting something or not, I'm just going to respond to that possible threat. King h7 is played. So we have rook to a6. Like I said when we started this video, very technical, just simple threats. Attacking the bishop has to move to square, or a piece has to defend the bishop. It plays rook to b8, defend the bishop. Another pressure, another attack on the bishop. Very simple position. Another attack on the bishop. The bishop has to go to c7. Now there's a threat, now there's a pin on the bishop and the queen and the f and the king. Like I said, I really love the way Pragg executed this game. It's so interesting. So bishop goes to c7. There's a pin. Anytime there's a pin, you always have to watch out for that pin. It breaks the pin off immediately. Puts him in another pin. Puts him in another extra attack. There was a rook on c1. The knight is on c4. Queen is on c6. Now we have a bishop on c7. So I have two pieces attacking this bishop. There's a direct attack on a7, and there's an indirect attack being through the rook on c1. So if I can throw this knight somewhere, these guys are going to be in trouble. So black has to respond to that threat. So rook goes to a8. Now the idea of the rook 8 is to get away one of the pieces, putting pressure on the c7. We have two, like I said earlier, the rook on a7 and the rook on c1. So rook a8 is played. Actually, rook a8 is not the best move here. Rook b7 would have been the best move. So after the move rook a8, pawn push. Now, what's the idea of the pawn push? There's pressure on this queen. So if queen takes, what's going to happen here? Because we cannot take the c7 because our queen is hanging. So if queen takes, what's the idea? Oh, probably knight to e3. Yes, knight to e3. Now I have two pieces on that rook, on the bishop on c7. So let's see what happened after pawn push. Knight takes on a7 first, attacking the queen. It takes back. Now it puts pressure on the queen. Queen simply comes to d4, protecting the pawn. And still, we have a pin on the c5, although we cannot move a knight yet because the rook on c1 is undefended. So queen goes to d7. d6, putting more pressure on the position. Like I said, this game was very, very interesting. It just kept simple threats. Bishop goes to d8. Now he's about to exchange out the knight. Just keep exchanging pieces. And of course, this makes more sense because now this knight's actually covering for this king. Without the knight on g6, queen check here is going to attack the king and also the rook on a8. So knight e5 is played. Queen goes to e6, says, you know what, I can't allow you to exploit that double attack on my king and my rook. So queen to e6 is played. Knight takes g6, f takes g6, and that makes a lot of sense, trying to bring all these pawns together. We have equal number of pawns on the king's side, but on the queen side, we have this one pawn that is very brutal. And it makes more sense for white for this pawn to be on the dark square because we have a dark square bishop. So rook to e1, another pressure on the king. The queen has to move. Queen moves to f7. Queen to e4. Not the best move here. Knight e5 would have been very strong. But of course, with such an advantage that white has, it's hard for white to go wrong here. The only way for white to lose this game is to make a huge, huge blunder. So queen to e4 is played. Rook goes to a7. moving away from the attack from the queen. Of course, I don't know why you could have moved the rook here to try to just snap the pawn off the board. But then it's probably going to push the pawn, or maybe you could push the pawn, or you could just move the knight to e5, putting pressure on the queen, putting pressure on g6. But he played rook to a7, knight goes to e5. Finally, we've been waiting for that knight to jump. Now, knight e5 is not just threatening the queen, but it's threatening to go to c6 to get rid of one of these pieces so that my people can keep going. So after the move knight to e5, queen goes to e6, knight c6 is played, queen takes, rook captures back, rook goes to d7. Anytime you have a pass pawn, you have to blockade the pass pawn. If you don't blockade the pass pawn can get into no lot of trouble. So after the move rook to e6, black plays h5, and after the move king h2, black resigns here. But why did black resign? It's really hard for black to come up with any kind of move. Number one, this bishop is very short of moves. You don't have the e7 square, you don't have the f6 square, you don't have the c7 square, nor the b6 square. And even so, you have the b6 square, but you don't have the a5 square. And of course, the knight e5 is coming. There's pressure on the pawn on g6. There's pressure on the blockader. And it's already about time that black just throws in the towel. So this was a very tactical win by Pragg. Like I said, it wasn't as if there was some kind of attack or some kind of brilliant play. No, it was really quiet. Just one move at a time, one simple thread at a time. It's interesting always to see a grandmaster being outplayed in such a very simple way. Okay, that's it for now, and we are going to see you soon. So, of course, we're going to very much enjoy your leaving comments and whatever things you think we should do better. And of course, we're going to bring you to some more videos. Take care, God bless, and have a wonderful day.